It's MonsterVerse, baby.
Following the success of Godzilla vs. Kong, Legendary saw the potential for King Kong in particular. Son of Kong went into immediate development with director Adam Wingard helping shape the project. At some point, Son of Kong was merged with the potential Godzilla idea, and Godzilla Kong: The New Empire quickly became the film it is today. In many ways, this is the first direct sequel in the MonsterVerse, as it's the first of these films to be done by a returning creative team continuing their vision directly. The story begins in 2027, as Kong finds himself settled into his lonely life in Hollow-Earth. His desire for companionship leads him to explore deeper in hopes of finding more of his kind. Meanwhile, Godzilla is hard at work on the surface, resuming his job as the king of the monsters, where we find him battling Scylla to the death. A sinkhole opens in Kong's hunting grounds, leading to a Hollow-Earth within Hollow-Earth somehow. At the same time, a signal is activated that scrambles Monarch systems and strikes Geo with psychic visions of danger to come. A dangerous titan emerges from the sinkhole and destroys Monarch's outpost. Seeking help understanding these developments, Eileen Andrews recruits Burning Haze into Monarch. Monarch launches an investigation team into Hollow-Earth. Godzilla attacks a nuclear power plant in France and absorbs all its radiation to supercharge. Kong explores the second Hollow-Earth, called the Subterranean Realm, where he immediately encounters a baby ape. Kong's then ambushed by multiple other apes and easily defeats them. He finds the child, who is never named on screen, but is called Suko in all out-of-film material. Kong instantly bonds with the child, who for some reason doesn't run away like the others, and the two set off. The exploration team ventures further into Hollow-Earth, following Gia's directions as she senses the signal that leads them to old Iwi temple remains and a living membrane that protects an Iwi civilization in Hollow-Earth. Despite Suko trying to get Kong killed, the two bond over a shared meal. Godzilla then attacks and kills Tiamat to absorb the radiation stockpiled in her home. The exploration crew is captured by the Iwi, who lead them to their temple and reveal they're the ones who signaled Monarch and Godzilla to war. Eileen discovers an Iwi prophecy that warns of the rise of Skar King, Godzilla's millionth-old rival who he fought in another Great Titan War and imprisoned in a fiery realm in Hollow-Earth. At the same time, Kong follows Suko to his home, the kingdom of Skar King. Skar King shows up and laughs at Kong before killing Suko's guardian. Kong challenges Skar and the two have a very brief but highly entertaining fight. After Kong gets some good hits in, Skar King unleashes his secret weapon, an enormous ancient titan called Shimo that he rules through pain using a magic crystal. Shimo freezes Kong's arm and forces him to retreat without his axe. Eileen finishes reading the prophecy, which tells of Shimo and how an Iwi from Skull Island will awaken Mothra to help Godzilla in his rematch. Suko helps save Kong from Skar King's ape army, and the two make their way to the Iwi kingdom because somehow Kong could sense Geo was there. Godzilla erupts from Tiamat's lair, evolved into a more powerful form. Monarch veterinarian Trapper equips Kong with a robotic glove, Monarch built to help enhance him after his fight with Mechagodzilla. The glove helps Kong and Gia asks him to get help for the upcoming fight. Immediately understanding what she means and knowing exactly where to go and what to do, Kong jumps through a portal he's never seen before and arrives in Egypt, where he roars to get Godzilla's attention. Godzilla, who was just in the North Pole one scene ago, now finds himself in Gibraltar. He hears Kong's roar and jumps into action, ready to fight to the death. Gia climbs a crystal pyramid and sticks her hand in the air, somehow materializing Mothra in the process. Mothra then takes off to the surface after Kong, apparently bringing Gia with her somehow. Godzilla shows up and goes for the kill as Kong tries to get help. Kong barely fights back, only losing his temper once, momentarily gaining the upper hand. Before Godzilla can kill Kong, Mothra appears and stops them. Godzilla and Gia have a moment for some reason, and then Godzilla gives a brief look at Mothra and follows her to Hollow-Earth. As the final battle between Godzilla, Kong, Shimo, and Skar King kick off, the Iwi collide two crystal pyramids, disrupting gravity and sending everybody flying through the air. Godzilla goes crazy, taking down Skar King's apes and attacking Shimo as Mothra webs up apes and saves the Monarch crew. The gravity comes back online and the main titans fall through a portal to Rio. The battle continues until Godzilla breaks Skar King's whip. Suko takes Kong's axe to the surface and uses it to destroy Skar King's crystal, freeing Shimo. Shimo freezes Skar King, and Kong destroys his frozen corpse. The movie ends with Gia choosing to stay with Eileen rather than the Iwi. Mothra stays with the Iwi and helps repair their village as Godzilla returns to Rome, finding a new home in the Colosseum. Kong takes Shimo as his new pet and rides her back to the Ape Kingdom, with his newly adopted son Suko, where they liberate their fellow apes. GXK has many of the same strengths and weaknesses of Godzilla vs. Kong. Many people agree that the film minimizes what doesn't work and amplify what does, but for me, this movie does the opposite. New Empire's greatest strengths are its ideas. The film is loaded with amazing concepts, from giving Kong a son to having him liberate the apes. Unfortunately, this movie doesn't earn any of it. Even more so than Godzilla vs. Kong, this is a movie where things just kinda happen because they do. From the collapse in gravity, which isn't given any explanation, to the Iwi signal, everything just occurs. There are constant plot holes, both small and massive. From Eileen using a single security camera to recover footage from a bunch of security cameras, to Skar King's control of Shimo, nothing makes sense and no attempt is even made to make things make sense. The backstories are all exposition vomit with no setup. The Iwi, being from Hollow Earth, is a major retcon from Kong Skull Island, and there's no sense of earned history between the Titans in the film. Skar King's reaction to two Titans blasting through a portal coming at him ready to kill him provides for two shots that people read into like no one's business to try and force an implied emotional connection between Skar King and Godzilla to fit their horrible backstory. The same can be said with Godzilla's underwhelming interactions with Mothra in this movie. It's impossible for this fandom to discuss this film on its own merits without involving information from outside materials like interviews, the novelization, or even headcanon. Explaining Godzilla's aggressive behavior, the Iwi Society, Mothra, or Skar King and Shimo's histories with the other Titans isn't Greg Keyes' job. It's this film's job. Ignoring outside materials and focusing on this movie as is, because that's what the filmmakers do, this barely works as a cohesive and satisfying narrative. This can be seen no better than with Mothra. While the original script for GXK featured Mothra, she was written out and replaced with a different Titan until late into post-production. This results in her reintroduction into the film being the downright sloppiest thing to ever happen in this cinematic universe. Every line where a character mentions her is ADR'd. Her mural constantly flickers between Mothra and the original Titan depending on whose angle we're seeing. She appears out of thin air without any explanation or established relationship to the Mothra from King of the Monsters, and she doesn't even add much value to the movie overall, being incredibly underutilized and never teaming up with Godzilla and Kong properly. The entire Iwi prophecy Eileen reads makes up the two worst scenes ever written in the MonsterVerse and leads to the sloppiest plot of the entire series. GXK isn't a movie that's trying to make sense. Kong stumbles into Suko and the apes immediately because the story needed him to. Suko sort of bonds with him right away again because the story needs him to, despite Kong using Suko as a weapon seconds earlier in a move that is completely out of character for him. Characters also teleport all over the planet just because. The gang leaves the Heave 2 miles away from the ridge, where they discover the ancient temple. They then travel many more miles to get to the current Iwi kingdom, where Kong randomly discovers them because he can sense Gia somehow. Trapper is then able to get back to the Heave so that he can get Kong the glove to heal him in what seems like only a few minutes, considering Skar King's advance has barely made it anywhere in that time. The worst example is Godzilla teleporting from the North Pole to Gibraltar and then from Gibraltar to Egypt in only a matter of minutes. Is it because he uses Hollow Earth tunnels to travel? Not according to Godzilla vs. Kong, which displays a scan of Earth repeated in this film, which reveals no such tunnels exist. There are only gates to Hollow Earth proper. Godzilla travels 2,800 miles in minutes because he needed to for the story to work. Not that viewers unfamiliar with geography would realize this, as the film makes it seem like they're only a few miles apart already. And why is it that Godzilla only now needs to evolve for war? Was Ghidorah not a big enough threat? The hyper-stylistic action displayed in this film shows Godzilla far faster, more agile, and more powerful at the start of this film than he's ever been before. His evolution doesn't accomplish anything he couldn't do earlier in this movie. He still gets knocked down by the Beast Glove and then doesn't use any of his new abilities for anything. He supercharges to attack Skar King in the end, but misses the entire time. When he does graze Skar King with his super beam, it does less damage than his normal breath did to Kong. That's not because Skar King is stronger than Kong either. Skar King would have been beaten by Kong in a weaponless fight, as demonstrated earlier. Much like the plot, even the action in this film just sort of happens. New Empire is unfortunately filled with missed potential. It takes great ideas that could have been developed meaningfully and squishes them into a film that moves at whiplash pacing. Coming in at an hour and 46 minutes without credits, GXK is the shortest MonsterVerse film that tries to do the most. Everything Godzilla does in this movie feels incredibly rushed, out of place, and distracts from runtime which should have been used to develop Skar King, who doesn't show up until 60% of the way through the film's film's runtime without credits. Mothra's inclusion feels like an afterthought to an afterthought. She only shares the screen for one single shot with both Godzilla and Kong, and her placement is incredibly underwhelming and leaves the final image feeling poorly crafted. Much like with Godzilla vs. Kong, while the action sequences tend to last for a while, the combat is very brief. Kong and Skar King's fight could have been one of the best sequences in the entire King Kong franchise. Instead, it's over in a few seconds. The anti-gravity battle had so much potential to be a fun, silly camp fest, but it goes by so quickly that it's only truly exciting for one single Godzilla moment, and the fight in Rio is mostly just chasing each other around or tackling one another without any true stakes or sense of danger or consequences or weight. Godzilla and Kong don't even really team up properly because they're split between two opponents. Their fight with Mechagodzilla featured more combo moves than this movie does, which only has 2 in the entire movie. Godzilla and Kong don't even meet until less than 20 minutes of the film are left. Kong is then sidelined during the final battle as he's stuck with Shimo trying to freeze his glove for way too long. If Shimo can freeze his arm and Skar King in only a matter of seconds, how can she not freeze the glove? The biggest shame is that this movie is filled with ideas that are good. The characters work so hard to redeem this film. The human cast is all delightful. While they aren't given much to do beyond just progress the story through random occurrences and conveniences, they're very charming. Everyone does a wonderful job and the cast is kept pretty small, which allows for time to develop their personalities. King Kong is the main character and his support is Suko. The two of them bond way too quickly, but it's a great story with amazing moments. This should have been way more of the movie. Skar King steals the show. His pure evil personality was so fun to watch. His mannerisms made him incredibly unique and his fighting style helped him to stand out against the other MonsterVerse villains. Suko being pulled between King Kong and Skar King is what this movie should have been. All 3 characters should have interacted way more. When people talk about what works in this film, this is what they're talking about. With more time, there could have been some good character exploration or themes unpacked as well. Many of the people who claim this movie has something to say argue it's a story about redemption, as a lonely man saves an abused child from a ruthless dictator. But those aren't themes. That's not the movie having anything to say. That's the plot. That's what the film is literally about. Spending more time with this plot is a rich goldmine for potential thematic weight and exploration that could have elevated this movie. As is, Godzilla, Shimo, and Mothra were all incredibly wasted in this film and were only here for marketing purposes. I truly believe that they should have stuck to their guns and made Son of Kong properly. Even if the Iwi plotline and Mothra were included, having Mothra and Kong team up against Skar King and the apes is more than enough to sell this film. There are so many other issues with Godzilla Kong the New Empire that I could get into, but I won't. These issues don't get in the way of the movie if you watch it the way it's intended to be viewed. While the original goal for the MonsterVerse was to tell sophisticated stories with Godzilla to redeem him from his persona as a children's icon, this movie is custom built for kids and works perfectly in that regard. And while I believe that a great movie doesn't require you to turn your brain off, this is a fast-paced adventure film with fun locations, exciting characters, silly moments, and good action. The movie is the ultimate sleepover film for you and your friends to watch in 5th grade on a Friday night with pizza and soda, and I truly appreciate it for that. While this film is incredibly flawed, it's still super charming. Godzilla Kong the New Empire is a sloppy mess that feels like 2 films brundle-flied into one. With nauseating pacing, a translucently thin plot, bad geography, no true thematic weight, semi-underwhelming action, and only 2 really iconic shots, this movie doesn't achieve its full potential at all. Further weighed down by annoying sound design and obnoxious music that's overly loud and chaotic and often plagiarizes either Akira Ifukube's Godzilla theme or Yuji Koseki's Mothra theme, this film still manages to have so much value. The VFX might be the weakest of the MonsterVerse, but they are used for wonderful purposes. The New Empire is an exploration of King Kong's character that takes him to places well beyond his original conception. Kong's dynamic with Suko, Skar King, and even Godzilla is amazing. The movie underutilizes his connection to Gia, completely ignoring what made both characters work so well in the previous film, but sort of makes up for it by pairing Kong with Suko for such long stretches. GXK is at its strongest when it's telling the story of King Kong trying to liberate his people. The film rises above its flaws and stands out as an enjoyable, monster-centric action film that harkens back to childhood and what it was like to watch movies as a kid. I really appreciate this film on so many levels. Most of all, I love its attempt to do new things, even when they don't land. Even if it doesn't achieve its full potential, pairing Godzilla, King Kong, and Mothra together is enough for any kaiju fan on its own. I would strongly recommend Godzilla Kong the New Empire to younger viewers, parents, hardcore kaiju fans, and adventure fans who don't mind turning their brains off and having a good time. Thank you so much for watching another episode of MonsterVerse May. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sticking with this series over the past few weeks. If you want to support this channel more directly, please consider supporting the Patreon through the link in the description below. Thank Thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed, I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man, out.